Chapter 8, Part 2. I felt lousy the rest of the way to the Tallahatchie. Arcee Rydell was one screwed up kid, and for the life of me, I couldn't understand why he, or anyone, would enjoy making other people miserable. Maybe Arcee was so miserable himself that he was always looking for somebody or something he could make worse off than he was. But he always took it too far. It's one thing to have a little fun with someone, teasing and stuff like that, but Arcee was just plain mean. And to tell you the truth, he scared the crap out of me. When I finally parked the truck at the clearing not far from Grandpa's fishing hole, I was feeling better. The lush green of the delta and the heavy damp smell from the fields helped me get my mind on something other than Arcee's bullying. Arcee woke up when I opened my door. "Where are we?" He looked around, confused. "Don't know for sure. A few miles from Money. Grandpa and I used to come here all the time when I was a kid. It's a good spot. Anyway, you can sleep some more if you want. I'm heading to the river to get settled." "Good idea." Arcee leaned his head back, closed his eyes, and waved me away. "I'll come down after I get me some more beauty rest." I grabbed the lunch sack, picked up my fishing gear, and worked my way down to the river's edge. I was glad to be alone. The morning sky was clear blue, the grass damp and dew-streaked. The sound of the wind in the trees and the flow of the Tallahatchie made me want to hurry up and find a shady spot to take a nap. I followed the narrow path parallel to the river for a few minutes until I recognized a place under an old cypress tree. I tucked the lunch bag up against the tree trunk, baited my hook, and cast out into the middle of the river. Then I sat down against the tree and watched the water. It felt great to be fishing again, but it didn't seem right without Grandpa. He needed to be there, because even though I loved the Delta countryside, that wasn't what I'd been missing. What I really wanted was to relive some of my favorite experiences that always included Grandpa. When I was little, he'd taught me to fish somewhere around here. I'd never had a bad day with Grandpa while we were fishing. Never saw him lose his temper, never had him get mad when I snagged my line or lost a fish. You know, he probably didn't care at all about catching fish back then. He took me fishing because he enjoyed spending time with me. I wondered about Dad and Grandpa. Had Dad ever stood here with Grandpa's arms around him, helping him cast a line? Had they ever told stories, joked, and splashed together on the riverbank while they cleaned the day's catch? Suddenly, it mattered a lot that they had. As much as I loved my good times with Grandpa, I didn't want them to be a substitute for what he should have done with Dad when he was a boy. My childhood memories with Grandpa might be something, maybe one of the only things, Dad and I had in common, and I made up my mind that when I got back to Tempe, I'd ask Dad about it. All my serious thinking ended when a rock ricocheted off the tree just above my head. "Ooh-wee, Hiram boy, you in a trance or what? I could have snuck up on you, slit your throat, swiped your lunch, and drove away in your truck without you even knowing it." Arcee tramped down to the riverbank. "You been drinking, boy?" "Just thinking. That's one of the things I like about being here." "No wonder you never catch no fish." Arcee set his pole down to bait his hook. "There's got to be somebody paying attention at your end of that pole, or those fish'll strip your hook clean." He pulled a bottle of beer from his bag. "Let me show you how this is supposed to be done, boy. First, you got to wet your whistle. The faster the better." He popped the cap off the bottle with his pocket knife, then chugged the entire beer without hardly taking a breath. "Ah, that's better." He tossed the empty bottle into the river. "Now, fish, look out. I'm a-comin' for you." Arcee walked a few yards downstream and cast his line into the river. Minutes later, I heard him whoop. "Got me one! Whoo, boy, this is going to be a good day." He pulled his stringer from his pocket and strung the fish on it. "Tell you one thing, Hiram, your granddaddy sure knows where the fish are." The rest of the morning went like that, Arcee guzzling beer and pulling in fish. By noon he had a stringer full of fish and a belly full of beer. He was red-faced and a little unsteady when he trudged over and dropped down alongside me. "All that fishin's made me hungry, Hiram boy. What you got for lunch?" I almost reminded him of what he'd said about Ruth Ann's food, but I figured I didn't want him to knock my teeth down my throat. "Help yourself to whatever's in there. We got plenty." He pulled out 2 sandwiches, tore the wax paper off one, and tossed the other to me. "Eat up, boy. Can't work on no empty stomach." He set the lunch sack between us, and we dug in. I hadn't realized how hungry I was, and, of course, Ruth Ann had packed us a sack lunch better than most people's suppers. We had a lot more than we could eat. While we ate, Arcee talked about how many fish he'd caught, his work down on the docks, and some raunchy stuff about girls he'd known. I knew most of his stories were a bunch of baloney, but it was mostly harmless stuff, so I didn't sweat it. I hadn't slept much the night before, and Ruth Ann's lunch, combined with heavy afternoon air, hit me like a sleeping drug. Arcee was yawning too, so I said, No place better in the Delta for a quiet nap than right in the shade of one of these willow trees. After we wake up, we can decide if we want to fish some more or head back into town. Arcee settled into a shady spot a few yards downstream and was snoring in minutes. I didn't last much longer. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I jerked awake. It took a moment for my head to clear, but when it did, I heard splashing and laughter from upstream. 30 or 40 yards from us, where the bank sloped gradually into shallow water, 4 Negro boys were horse-playing around in the water. Dressed only in cut-off pants, all of them were soaking wet. They were playing some sort of 3-on-1, where 3 of them ganged up on one to dunk him. I watched them wrestle, splash, and laugh. They were really having a good time, splashing their way downstream, and when they were close enough, I recognized one of them. Emmett wasn't the biggest kid, but he was the best at playing their game. He was as wet as any of them, but he was always one of the dunkers and never the dunkee. A couple of the boys saw me sitting in the shade of that tree, and as soon as they did, they stopped dead, pointed at me, and motioned to the others to head back upstream. Emmett didn't want to stop, and he was the last one to see me. He held one hand over his eyes to shade his view. Then he recognized me, waved, and started walking toward me. The other boys grabbed him. "You crazy?" one said. "Let's get out of here before there's trouble." "Trouble?" Emmett waved a hand at them. "That's one of my friends, the old Tallahatchie lifeguard. He ain't no trouble." "He's white," hissed one of the boys. "That's trouble enough." Didn't I tell you I had white friends up in Chicago?" He slogged through the shallow water and onto the riverbank. I wanted to keep him as far away from Arcee as I could, so I jumped up and met him at the bank. When he saw me coming, he turned to his friends and said, "See, told you we was friends." "Hey, Emmett," I said, "what are you all up to?" "Just goofing around with some of my cousins. Too hot to be anywhere but in the water. What are you doing? Fishing or sleeping?" "Little of both, I guess. Ruth Ann's lunch and this old Mississippi sun pretty much wiped me out." "Lunch?" Emmett's face lit up. "We're starving. Got anything left?" Emmett's friends had stayed behind him a ways in the water, close enough to hear but far enough away to escape if they had to. "Aw, geez, Emmett," said one. "Let's just get on home. No need to be hanging around here." Emmett waved a hand behind his back and said without even turning around, "You all go on if you want to. I'm going to get me something to eat." The boys didn't move. "Told you," said one. "He's crazy." They all laughed and splashed water at him. "Wait here," I told Emmett. "I'll go grab my lunch sack, and you all can have whatever's left in it." I started back to the tree where I'd left my stuff, but Emmett followed me. "Shoot," he said. "I don't want to stand out there with that old sun beating down on me eating my lunch. No snakes up around that tree, is there?" When they saw him follow me up on shore, Emmett's friends whooped and laughed. "Go, Bobo," one yelled. "Go, you crazy boy." I turned around and faced him. "Look, it'd be better if you stayed down there. My friend's sleeping over there, and he probably doesn't want to get woke up." "Hey, any friend of yours is a friend of mine," Emmett said with a grin. "Now, let's see what Ruth Ann packed us for lunch." He wasn't going to listen, so I figured the best thing to do was to give him my lunch and get him out of there. I handed him the sack as his cousins kept laughing and yelling at him. He ignored them. Unfortunately, Arcee didn't. He came up from behind and shoved me out of the way so he was facing Emmett himself. "What the hell's going on here?" he said slowly. Arcee's face was red and he smelled like stale beer. "Looks like you caught yourself one hell of a colored fish, Hiram." He snorted through his nose, cleared his throat, and spit at Emmett's feet. "Too bad it's a trash fish. You'll have to throw him back." I had a feeling something real ugly was about to happen. For some reason, maybe because he didn't know Arcee, Emmett didn't seem worried at all, even though his cousins had backed away without making a sound. "Let's not have any trouble, Arcee," I said. "I was just giving Emmett our leftovers." "Giving our lunch to an N? You must be as crazy as your pa was. I'd just as soon throw our food to the fish as see it go to waste on this trash." He snatched the sack out of Emmett's hand. "You leave this be, Hiram, or I'll fix you, your grandpa, and your whole family real good. I swear to God." Arcee glared at me with pure hatred, and I backed off, afraid to do anything more. "Hey," Emmett chuckled nervously. Finally, he must have gotten some good sense. "I didn't mean nothing. My friend here was sharing his lunch, and—" Arcee shoved him in the chest. "White folk don't share nothin' with colored boy. Nothin'." Emmett staggered back a step, but didn't shut up. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it, but he did say we could have the sack. Why don't you just let me have it, and we'll get out of here?" "Don't you hear, boy, or are you just tired of breathing?" Arcee threw the lunch sack down and kicked it out of the way. "I've had enough of your uppityness." He lunged forward and grabbed Emmett in a headlock. "You so hungry, I'll feed you lunch." Arcee dragged him over to where he'd been fishing. Emmett struggled and complained at first, but Arcee tightened his grip around Emmett's neck, and he quieted down, half scrambling, half being dragged behind Arcee. When they got to the riverbank, Arcee threw Emmett on the ground and held him there with one knee on his chest. He reached over and pulled his fish line out of the river and laid the fish across Emmett's bare stomach. When a fish twitched, Emmett flexed upward and tried to twist away, but Arcee's knee kept him pinned. "Let me go," Emmett yelled. "Get off me." "Lunchtime, boy," Arcee said as he pulled his pocket knife from his pants. He opened the blade and held it over Emmett. Emmett froze. "Come on, Arcee," I yelled. "Cut it out." He waved his knife at me. "I warned you once, Hiram. Ain't gonna do it again." Then he smiled. "'Sides, I ain't doing nothing but giving this uppity black boy his lunch. You hold still, boy," he said to Emmett. "I'd hate to see you get hurt by accident." Arcee swung his leg over and sat on Emmett's stomach. Then he slid the fish up to Emmett's neck. His knife blade flashed in the sun. "Come on, get off!" Emmett yelled as he bucked upward, trying to throw Arcee off, but Arcee was too big for him. "Hang on, boy. You don't want me to drop this knife on some vital part, do you? Just sit still while I get you some lunch." He pulled the largest fish off the stringer and held it in one hand with its white belly facing up. "Carp. You coloreds love carp." He stuck his blade into the tail end of the fish and cut up to its head, letting the blood drip onto Emmett's chest and face. He gagged and yelled for help, but Arcee held him. Arcee threw his knife into the ground just inches from Emmett's face. Emmett didn't move, didn't yell. His eyes looked huge. Then Arcee scraped the guts out of the fish and shoved them in Emmett's face. Emmett thrashed and twisted his head from side to side, and Arcee threw the fish carcass into the river so he could use one hand to hold Emmett's head still and the other to hold the guts over Emmett's mouth and nose. "Arcee, he can't breathe," I yelled. "You're going to kill him." He ignored me, and when Emmett finally opened his mouth for air, Arcee shoved the guts in and rolled off Emmett, laughing. "You wasn't as hungry as you thought, boy," he said as Emmett retched and rolled on the ground. Arcee shook the blood from his hands onto Emmett. "Guess fresh carp don't much agree with you after all. That be the case, you best learn not to be so uppity around white folks, and you damn well better not be coming round here asking for food again. Seems to me you don't like what we got to offer." Emmett knelt on all fours, coughing and spitting. When he caught his breath, he turned and glared at Arcee, and then at me, before sliding into the shallow edge of the river and wading back to his cousins. They hadn't moved since Arcee woke up. Arcee picked up his pocket knife, wiped the blade on his pant leg, folded it close, and shoved it into his pocket. "Let's get out of here, Hiram. I'm done fishing." He picked up his stuff and headed back up the path to the truck. I stayed behind, sick to my stomach, embarrassed and scared. Emmett and his cousins waded upstream with Emmett walking between two of them, leaning heavily on their shoulders. I wanted to say something, to yell that I was sorry, that I thought Arcee was evil and messed up, but they were too far to hear by then. Besides, I'd had my chance to do something, but all I'd done was watch Arcee humiliate that boy. I felt dirty and weak and ashamed.